Joining us now to discuss all of this and its import or lack thereof, President Trump's battles to rein in his cabinet and speak with one voice on North Korea and all else. Our first guest tonight is former U.S. Ambassador to the United Nations, Fox News contributor John Bolton. Ambassador, good to have you with us.
Glad to be with you.
I would like to start, if I may, with General Kelly. This is the man in charge of the White House, the senior official. For him to even posit the possibility that there is any kind of daylight between country and the President of the United States, to me, is effrontery that I wouldn't tolerate for a second.
Yeah, with all due respect to General Kelly, I would not have put it that way. I think he's trying to rally the White House staff, trying to bring some unity, trying to stop the fractiousness that we've all seen. I think that's quite important. But the way I would have put it to the White House staff is to say, look, it is an honor for you to serve your country here in the White House, and you have a duty of loyalty to the President. He listens to your advice. He makes the decisions. Your job is to carry out what his decisions are, not to leak to the press, not to seek to obstruct them, but to carry out his decisions. And if in good conscience you finally come to the day when you can't do that, the honorable thing to do is resign. But undercutting the President's decisions while you're still in the White House is dishonorable. That's the way I would have put it. And I think that you would have put it perfectly. I am stunned at the patronizing, condescending tone taken in discussing this president, whether in ostensibly people supporting him or not. I mean, this suggestion that Nikki Haley, the UN ambassador, asked how they rounded up a unanimous vote in the Security Council, immediately showered herself with glory. And did not mention the President of the United States, Ambassador, not once. Well, watch the discretion of a former UN ambassador from the United States. Look, the fact is that since 2006, when the first sanctions resolutions against North Korea were put in place, and there have been 7 or 8, depending on your count, all of them were 15-0. So it's not any different from the sanctions resolutions in the past. And I can tell you from my own experience, these votes are not obtained solely by the genius of the UN ambassador, even though there have been a lot of them. This is a combined effort by the White House, the State Department, and others. So there's a lot of heavy lifting involved. There's no doubt about it. And much of that heavy lifting initiated by the President himself in discussions and meetings and meals with President Xi Jinping of China. Personally. Yeah, I remember when George H.W. Bush was president, the people at the State Department were just irritated that he kept calling other heads of government and negotiating UN resolutions with them. They called him the mad dialer. They couldn't understand it. But that's what it takes. It absolutely does. It takes a leader, and we have a leader. And what we have are a bunch of mediocrities who seem to be extraordinarily uncomfortable with a man who stands straight up and says what he means and who ran against the very establishment that now recoils and is trying to subvert his administration. Yeah, I would say this. Look, any president is entitled to a management decision-making structure that suits his preferences. There's no one right answer. But this is certainly the case. When you have the views that Donald Trump does, which are so different from many in the foreign policy establishment, in the bureaucracy, you have to have a structure that maximizes your reach and your ability to change what the bureaucracy's natural inclination is. I think that requires more coordination at the White House. I think, again, of the Bush 41 administration as an excellent example, where the personalities involved were very strong. Jim Baker, Secretary of State, Dick Cheney as Secretary of Defense. They were not shrinking violets, but they worked with Brent Scowcroft, the National Security Advisor. There was none of this business we hear from the pundits who think they understand what happens in government, who say, well, they're playing a good cop, bad cop routine. Under Bush 41, there was one message on Iraq, one message on the fall of the Soviet Union, and it was done, I think, with consummate skill. I think Donald Trump needs to enforce that kind of discipline, not just in the White House, but across the government.
I couldn't agree more. And that discipline, I have to commend the president taking on the Senate Majority Leader, Mitch McConnell. Mitch McConnell talking about the president has too high of expectations. Now, the U.S. Senate, I think you and I can agree, and just about everyone watching and listening to us will agree, has never been a body that to anyone seemed to epitomize excellence in either thought or policy. But the reality is we have now such mediocrities in the leadership of both the House and the Senate. It's all but impossible to overcome their inertia, their Luddite-like natures, and their refusal to look reality square in the face and understand this president won an election seeking to change the status quo.
Yeah, I'll say this. From my conversations around the country, raising money for my PAC and Super PAC, giving speeches in different parts of the country, Republicans are very disappointed with the performance that they've seen in the first 7 months from Congress, and it's undifferentiated. And I think really everybody's got to figure out here, as Benjamin Franklin said at the Continental Congress when they looked at the Declaration of Independence, gentlemen, we must all hang together or surely we will all hang separately. There are too many prima donnas in Congress, and that's why the legislative record is so sparse. That's got to stop.
And the threat by North Korea to enveloping fire with 4 missiles surrounding Guam. What should we do? How should this government respond?
Well, I think taking first the possibility of an actual North Korean attack on Guam. It is sovereign American territory. People born on Guam are born American citizens. An attack on Guam is the equivalent of an attack on California, and North Korea will not exist in the form we see it now if they do that. But the longer-term question that I think the president's trying to grapple with is whether we will accept a North Korea with deliverable nuclear weapons, which Obama's National Security Advisor Susan Rice said this morning in the New York Times. She was perfectly prepared to accept it.
Incomprehensible. Absolutely incomprehensible.
The same people who said that they could negotiate North Korea out of the nuclear weapons are now saying, you got to live with it. Yeah. I do not believe we should live with that threat. I do not believe future generations of Americans, whether it's Iran or North Korea or other proliferating states, should have to live with that. That can mean some very hard decisions. It means the military option has to be examined very closely, because as long as North Korea has that nuclear capability with ballistic missiles or tramp steamers, we are in jeopardy, and I don't think we should accept that.
And it is without question the legacy of Barack Obama's 2 terms as President of the United States. And the list only gets longer and appreciably more threatening to U.S. interests.